Have you ever reached a place in your life where you looked around and thought, I don't fit here anymore? Not because the world around you has changed, but because you have. Nobody really talks about this part of healing. We talk about boundaries, self-love, breaking cycles, but very few people talk about what comes next. The quiet season where your awareness has changed, but your life hasn't caught up yet. Where the conversations you've always had don't quite feel the same anymore. The relationships that once felt natural begin to feel different. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, you find yourself asking, where do I belong now? Today, I want to talk about why this happens and why it may be one of the most natural parts of returning to yourself. I want to tell you what this actually looked like for me. Years ago, I remember a coach telling me that when you do this kind of work, the deep inner work I talk about on this channel, you often become a lone wolf for a while. I remember feeling myself retreat inside. A lone wolf? That sounded so isolating. But she was right. My whole world changed. And with it came the good, the bad, and the ugly. Healing isn't always beautiful. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it's painful. And sometimes it costs you more than you expected. Yet at the same time, it gives you back more than you imagined. When I started doing the inner work, the real work, the quiet, unglamorous work of uprooting what I have been carrying, something began to shift. Not just inside of me, but around me. I started seeing things I couldn't unsee. Patterns in my family that had always been there, but that I had learned to move around, to accommodate, to participate in without question. Conversations that had always felt off. Moments I smiled through and drove home from, feeling hollow, unsettled, unable to name why. I'd always felt something, I just didn't have the language for it yet. Healing gave me the language for what I had always felt. I started showing up differently in relationships. I started saying no when I needed to say no. I started putting boundaries in place, not to punish anyone, not out of anger, but because I could no longer abandon myself just to keep the peace in places that cost me my authenticity. I stopped participating in conversations that had always circulated in my family, not conversations meant to resolve anything, just a way of being that had existed for us for as long as I could remember. And when I stopped showing up that way, the distance came. It wasn't about seeing anyone as less. It was about seeing the world through a different lens. When you began to move beyond the fear and conditioning you've carried for so long, when you stop making decisions from a place of survival and begin choosing from a place of love and authenticity, you start to see how much of the world is still operating inside that fear. I understood that language because it had been ingrained into me from a very young age. It wasn't just mirrored in the world around me. It ran through my family like poison. But as I uprooted the conditioning and began to understand myself more deeply, I started noticing the patterns I had been part of, the dynamics I had accepted simply because they were familiar, situations that pulled me under instead of lifting me. As I built a relationship with myself through gratitude, reflection, meditation, and filling my mind with truth, I slowly began rewriting the story I had been living. I learned to meet both myself and others with more compassion. I stopped seeing people through labels, and I stopped seeing my life through the eyes of a victim. And because of that, I stopped being pulled into those same dynamics. Instead of reacting, I started observing. Instead of being triggered, I started stepping back. I started questioning myself and everything I had been told and programmed to believe. And slowly I became the observer, standing outside dynamics I used to be entangled in. That is a lonely place to stand. Not because the people around me were bad, but because they knew the version of me that was still inside the fear. And when I stopped showing up that way, when I changed, Some of them didn't know how to relate to me anymore. And honestly, sometimes I didn't know how to bridge the distance either. The relationships that fit the person I had to become may not fit the person I am remembering myself to be. And sitting with that truth is one of the quietest, most tender griefs of a soul's journey. Here's the first thing I want you to hear. The loneliness of this season is not a sign that something went wrong. It is a sign that you are in transition. And real transition always has a passage, a space between who you were and who you are becoming. And that space can feel profoundly lonely. I remember looking at my life and thinking, what happened? Did I just dynamite my whole life and blow it up? Because a version of you that used to fit those relationships, those dynamics, those conversations was real. You were doing what you needed to do to survive. The people around you knew that version of you. They understood it. They related to it. But that was not the whole of you. That version was the you that was shaped by fear, by conditioning, by everything you absorbed before you had the awareness to question it. And now you are remembering who you've always been beneath all of that. And the loneliness you feel is simply the space between the life that was built around the survival version of you and the life that is beginning to reflect who you truly are. That gap is not permanent, but it is real. The loneliness is not the finality. It is a passage. Here's the second thing, and this distinction changed everything for me. Loneliness and solitude are not the same thing. And in the lone wolf season, learning to tell them apart is one of the most important things you can do. Loneliness is the ache of no longer fitting where you once belonged. It is the grief of distance, the quiet that comes after a relationship shifts or a dynamic changes. It has a specific weight to it, the weight of something that used to be there and no longer is. Solitude is something else entirely. Solitude is the quiet of finally being with yourself, of sitting in a room alone and not feeling the need to fill it, or hearing your own voice, your real voice, not the one shaped by fear, conditioning, or other people's expectations, and recognizing it, trusting it, following it. In the lone wolf season, you will feel both, sometimes within the same hour. The invitation of this season is to learn how to be with yourself without panic, to stop reaching for the noise just because the quiet feels unfamiliar. If you've watched my conversation on anxiety, you'll remember me saying that our nervous system is wired to return to what is familiar. That's why this season can feel so uncomfortable. Healing asks us to stop returning to what is familiar and begin choosing what is true. Because in the quiet is where you find yourself, your own values, your own knowing, your own sense of what is true and what was simply handed to you. Things that were always there but could never be heard above the noise of everything else. In the lone wolf season, it is easy to turn the loneliness inward, to wonder if you've changed too much, to look at the distance that has grown and ask, was this worth it? Did I do something wrong? You didn't. What happened is simpler and more profound than that. You grew. You chose yourself. And not everyone around you is in the same timeline. And that is not a reason to go back. Because here's what I know from the other side of this season. The people who can truly meet the version of you that is returning to itself do exist. The people who won't ask you to become smaller in order to belong. The people who recognize something familiar in you because they are remembering themselves too. But here's what I've learned. They become easier to recognize when you stop looking for connection from the place inside of you that was only trying to survive. Because when you begin remembering who you are, you stop searching for belonging in places that asked you to forget. And as you continue honoring who you truly are, the universe begins reflecting that truth back to you through the people, opportunities, and experiences that support you, nurture you, and help you continue growing. Because every new beginning starts with one decision. You made a choice, and that choice was you. You chose to step into the light, to return to the true essence of who you are. And that isn't just about becoming more empowered. It's about honoring your soul's journey, the evolution your soul came here to remember. Now let's sit quietly with what all of that means. We spend our whole lives believing we are at the mercy of our circumstances, moving through life as though it is happening to us, when in truth, it is our remembering of the journey we came here to walk that sets us on the path back to the soul beneath the noise. I will leave you with these questions to sit with. Where in your life have you noticed that your healing has changed the way you relate to the people around you? And this one, are you in a season of loneliness right now or solitude? Sit with the difference, because the answer will tell you something important about where you are. If this conversation resonated with you and you're ready to continue your own return to self, I've created something for you, my guided return to unconditional self-love bundle. You can find it in the link below. And if you want to be part of these conversations in this community, I encourage you to follow, subscribe, and leave a comment. Because I truly believe that when we begin healing ourselves, we create more compassion, more understanding, and ultimately a better world for everyone. With much love, I'll see you in the next one, dear soul.